What happens when entitlement meets reality? When the illusion of control crashes into the raw edge of truth? You think you own your space, your land, your silence, until someone decides they know better. But what if the real trespass isn't physical at all? What if it's ideological? This isn't just a story about a woman who drove onto my farm and blew her tires. It's about power, delusion, and the cost of believing you're above consequence. Welcome to the road where illusion ends. It began not with a bang, but with a low hum of tires on gravel, a sound that should have meant nothing, but instead signaled everything. I was standing by the barn, watching the dust rise like a warning flare, and I knew before I saw her face that something was off. There's a rhythm to life out here, a silence that speaks louder than words, and when it's broken, you feel it in your bones. She came in fast, like she belonged, like the road was hers, like the signs didn't apply. And maybe that's the first truth we need to confront. Entitlement doesn't knock, it barges in. Karen didn't just drive onto my land. She drove into a philosophy I spent years building. This farm isn't just soil and fences. It's a boundary, a statement, a refusal to be absorbed by the noise of the world. And yet, here she was, HOA Karen, queen of suburban order, bringing her rules into my chaos. Her SUV gleamed like a threat, polished and proud, a symbol of curated control. But control is a myth, isn't it? We build fences and write laws and pretend we're safe. But the truth is, safety is a story we tell ourselves to sleep at night. I watched her roll past a private property sign like it was suggestion, not a declaration. And I wondered, what makes someone believe they're exempt from consequence? Is it wealth, status, or something deeper, more insidious? The belief that the world should bend to their will? She didn't see the spikes. Or maybe she did, and thought they wouldn't apply to her. That's the thing about illusions. They blind you to the obvious. I didn't yell. I didn't run. I just stood there, letting the moment unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Her tires met the spikes with a sound that was almost poetic. Metal meeting resistance, arrogance meeting reality. And in that instant, I saw it. The shift. The moment when confidence curdles into confusion. She stepped out of the car, heels clicking on gravel, eyes scanning the damage like it was someone else's fault. And I thought, this is the world we live in now. A world where boundaries are negotiable, where trespass is rebranded as oversight, where personal responsibility is a relic. She looked at me like I was the intruder, like my land had betrayed her. And I realized this wasn't just about a road. It was about ideology, about the clash between curated suburbia and raw reality. HOA rules don't apply here. Out here, the land speaks for itself. And it doesn't care about your titles, your committees, your sense of order. It only cares about truth. And truth, like spikes, doesn't yield. I didn't say a word. I let the silence do the talking. Because sometimes silence is the loudest protest. She dialed her phone, probably to summon reinforcements, to report the injustice of consequence. But there was no injustice here. Only cause and effect. Only the echo of a choice made in arrogance. And as she stood there, stranded on a road she didn't own, I felt something shift in me too. A clarity. A reminder. That control is an illusion. And that sometimes the land itself has to teach that lesson. She approached me like I owed her something. Like the damage to her tires was a personal betrayal, not the natural consequence of her own arrogance. Her voice was sharp, clipped, the kind of tone that's been trained in boardrooms and HOA meetings, where power is measured in decibels and passive aggression. "You can't do this," she said, gesturing to the spikes like they were an act of war. But I didn't flinch, because I've learned something out here, something the suburbs never taught her. Nature doesn't negotiate. She kept talking, layering her outrage with legalese and moral superiority, but all I heard was fear. Fear disguised as authority. And isn't that what civility often is? A mask, a performance, a way to control the narrative without ever confronting the truth. She wanted me to apologize, to explain, to bend, but I didn't, because this wasn't about tires. It was about territory, about the invisible lines we draw to protect ourselves from the chaos of others. She called me unreasonable. That word hung in the air like smoke. But what does it mean to be reasonable in a world that constantly erases your boundaries? Is it reasonable to let someone violate your space because they do it with a smile? Is it reasonable to pretend that politeness is more important than principle? I looked at her and saw not a person, but a system that believes it can rewrite reality with enough confidence. She spoke of community standards as if her HOA charter extended to my soil. But this isn't a cul-de-sac. This is a farm, a place where things grow wild, where control is earned, not assumed. And still, she insisted, she wanted to talk to someone in charge. I told her she already had, and that's when her civility cracked. The smile faded, the voice rose, the mask slipped, and beneath it, I saw the raw entitlement, the belief that her comfort mattered more than my autonomy. She accused me of being hostile, but I hadn't moved. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't even stepped forward. And yet to her, my stillness was aggression. My silence was defiance. Because in her world, resistance must always be loud, chaotic, uncivilized. But here's the truth. Sometimes the most radical act is to stand your ground without apology. She threatened legal action. I nodded. She said I'd regret this. I didn't respond, because I already knew what she didn't. That civility without respect is just another form of violence. That politeness can be a weapon. That sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who smile while they trespass. And as she turned back to her car, heels clicking like punctuation marks in a sentence she thought she was writing, I felt no anger, only clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a collision between illusion and truth, between performance and presence. And in that moment, I understood she wasn't here to talk. She was here to conquer. But this land doesn't yield to conquest. It answers only to truth. She didn't leave quietly. That would have required reflection, humility, two things she'd long since traded for certainty and control. Instead, she left with a promise. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. And just like that, the conflict shifted from gravel to paper, from land to language, from reality to theater. Because that's what the legal system often is, isn't it? A stage. A place where truth is dressed in costume, where power speaks through procedure, where justice is filtered through performance. Days passed. Then came the letter. Formal, sterile, wrapped in the kind of language that pretends to be neutral but drips with accusation. She claimed I'd endangered her, that my spikes were reckless, malicious, designed to harm. And I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. This is how systems protect the entitled. Not by asking what happened, but by asking who has a louder voice. Her lawyer spoke of reasonable expectations, of public access, of community norms. But this isn't a community, it's a boundary. And boundaries don't bend to expectation. They exist to be respected. I sat with a letter for hours, not out of fear, but out of disbelief. How had we come to this? A woman drives onto private land, ignores signs, damages her own vehicle, and somehow, I'm the one under scrutiny. But that's the trick, isn't it? The law doesn't always seek truth. Sometimes it seeks order. And order, in her world, means hierarchy. She assumed the system would side with her, that her HOA credentials, her polished language, her suburban pedigree would outweigh my silence, my soil, my truth. And maybe she was right. Maybe the system is built for people like her. People who trespass with confidence and litigate with ease. But I wasn't afraid, because I knew something she didn't. That justice isn't just a courtroom. It's a reckoning. And sometimes the land itself delivers it. I responded, not with a lawyer, but with a statement. I laid out the facts, the signs, the history, the philosophy. I made it clear this wasn't about spikes. It was about sovereignty, about the right to define your space, your silence, your sanctuary. Her lawyer replied with more threats, more jargon, more theater. But I didn't engage, because every word they wrote only proved my point. That power hates resistance. That system's built on control will always punish defiance. And yet I stood firm, not because I wanted to fight, but because I refused to be rewritten. She wanted the narrative to change, to become a story of victimhood, of danger, of injustice. But the truth was simpler. She trespassed. She ignored. She paid the price. And now, she wanted to erase that truth with paperwork. But truth doesn't yield to ink. It lives in the land, in the silence, in the moment her tires met the spikes. That was the verdict. That was the sentence. And no lawyer could undo it. I didn't go to court. I didn't need to. Because sometimes the most powerful response is to let the system exhaust itself trying to rewrite a truth that's already been carved into the road. It didn't take long for the story to spread. Not through facts, but through whispers, posts, screenshots, and selective outrage. Karen didn't just file a complaint. She launched a campaign. Suddenly, I wasn't just a man defending his land. I was a villain, a threat, a symbol of something broken. The HOA forums lit up with speculation, half-truths, and moral panic. Dangerous spikes on a public road. Aggressive landowner refuses to cooperate. What if a child had been hurt? The narrative was shifting, not because it was true, but because it was useful. And that's the danger of community. It can become a mob. I watched as neighbors I'd barely spoken to wade in with certainty, as if proximity granted insight. They spoke of shared values, of reasonable expectations, of safety. But none of them had walked the road. None of them had seen the signs. None of them had asked me what happened. Because truth wasn't the goal, consensus was. And consensus is a fragile thing, built not on facts, but on comfort. Karen's story was comforting. It fit the mold. The suburban woman, victimized by the outsider. The HOA member, defending order against chaos. It was a story they could rally around. And so they did. I became the antagonist in a play I never auditioned for. My silence was interpreted as guilt. My refusal to engage was seen as arrogance. And I realized the community doesn't want truth. It wants affirmation. It wants to believe that its rules are universal, that its values are absolute. But they're not. They're contextual. They're performative. They're fragile. I received emails, some polite, some threatening. I was told I was not a team player, that I was creating division, that I was endangering the harmony of a neighborhood. And I thought, what harmony? The kind that erases boundaries? The kind that punishes dissent? The kind that demands conformity at the expense of autonomy? Karen posted photos of her damaged tires. She framed them like war wounds. And the comments poured in sympathy, outrage, call for action. But no one asked why she was on my road. No one asked what signs she ignored. No one asked what right she had to be there. Because asking those questions would fracture the illusion. And illusions are sacred in communities like this. They protect the myth of unity, the myth of shared values, the myth of civility. But myths don't hold under pressure. They crack. They collapse. And when they do, you see what lies beneath. Fear, control, and the desperate need to silence anything that doesn't fit. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I refused to play the role they'd written for me. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the rebel. I was the mirror. And mirrors are dangerous. They reflect what people don't want to see. Karen wanted justice. The community wanted order. I wanted truth. And truth, I've learned, is rarely welcome in places built on illusion. Out here, a fence isn't just wood and wire. It's a declaration, a line drawn not in hostility, but in clarity. And yet, every time someone crosses it without permission, they rewrite its meaning. They turn it into a challenge, a provocation, a dare. Karen didn't just ignore my signs. She ignored the philosophy behind them. Because boundaries aren't just about keeping people out. They're about keeping meaning intact. I built this road with intention. Not just to connect spaces, but to define them, to say, this is mine, this is sacred, this is not yours to claim. And when she drove onto it, she didn't just trespass physically, she trespassed ideologically. She brought with her a worldview that says, if I want it, it's mine. If I don't understand it, it must be wrong. If it doesn't serve me, it must be changed. But resistance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a spike buried in gravel. Sometimes it's a refusal to explain. And that refusal is powerful. Because in a world that demands constant justification, silence becomes rebellion. I didn't install those spikes out of malice. I installed them out of necessity, because I've learned that politeness doesn't protect you, that civility doesn't stop intrusion, that sometimes the only ethical response is a hard boundary. And yes, it hurts, it disrupts, it offends, but that's the point. Boundaries are meant to be felt, to be respected, to be feared if necessary. Karen saw my resistance as aggression, but what she didn't see was the years of erosion that led to it, the slow drip of entitlement, the constant negotiation of space, the endless explanations. And at some point you stop explaining, you start defending, and defense by its nature is uncomfortable. She wanted me to be reasonable, but reason in her world meant surrender. It meant compromise. It meant erasure. And I refused, because there's a difference between peace and submission, between harmony and silence, between community and conformity. I chose resistance, not because I hate her, but because I love this land, this silence, this autonomy, and love, real love, demand protection, even when it's misunderstood, even when it's punished, even when it's called aggression. I've been told I should have handled it differently, that I should have talked, explained, negotiated, but I've done that before, and it didn't work, because some people don't come to understand. They come to conquer, and the only language they respect is consequence. So I gave her consequence, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. And clarity, I've learned, is the most ethical gift you can give someone who refuses to listen. She may never understand. The community may never forgive, but I will never regret it, because in that moment, I chose truth over comfort, autonomy over approval, resistance over erasure, and that, to me, is the highest form of ethics. The dust settled, but the silence didn't return, not the way it used to. Something had shifted, not just in the land, but in me. The road was still there, the spikes still buried, the sign still standing. But the meaning had deepened, darkened, clarified. Karen never came back. Her lawsuit dissolved quietly, like a storm that never quite reached land. The community moved on, distracted by new dramas, new villains, new illusions. But I couldn't forget, not because of the conflict, but because of what it revealed, that we live in a world where boundaries are negotiable, where autonomy is suspicious, where silence is threatening. I used to believe that truth would protect me. That clarity would be enough. But now I know truth is not a shield. It's a mirror, and mirrors are dangerous. They reflect not just what is, but what we refuse to see. Karen's trespass wasn't unique. It was symbolic, a symptom of a culture that believes access is a right, that comfort is a virtue, that resistance is hostility. And I wonder, how many roads have been crossed without consequence? How many boundaries erased in the name of civility? How many truths buried beneath the weight of performance? I didn't win. There was no victory, only exposure, only revelation, only the quiet ache of knowing that the world punishes clarity. I still walk that road, still feel the gravel beneath my boots, still hear the echo of tires meeting spikes. And every time I do, I ask myself, what did she see when she looked at me? A threat? A relic? A refusal? And what did I see in her? A trespasser? A symptom? A mirror? The truth is, we were both illusions to each other. She thought I was the problem. I thought she was the system. But maybe we were both just stories, colliding, unraveling, exposing. I've stopped expecting understanding, stopped hoping for consensus, because autonomy is lonely, resistance is isolating, truth is expensive, but I wouldn't trade it, not for approval, not for comfort, not for peace, because peace built on erasure isn't peace at all. It's silence, and silence, I've learned, is the most dangerous illusion of all. So I keep the signs up, keep the spikes buried, not out of spite, but out of memory, out of philosophy, out of love, because this land deserves protection. This truth deserves space. And this story, uncomfortable, unsettling, unresolved, deserves to be told, not for Karen, not for the community, but for anyone who's ever drawn a line and been punished for it, for anyone who's ever said no and been called dangerous, for anyone who's ever chosen truth over comfort. This is your road, your silence, your mirror. Guard it well.